Next, on Currents News, reaction at the U.S. Bishops' National Meeting in Baltimore the day after the Vatican stepped in and put a hold on actions to confront the clerical sex abuse crisis.
Abuse of a child is the closest that you can get to murder.
A sex abuse survivor from the Brooklyn Diocese has a message for the bishops, and they're listening. Plus, the diocese is saying goodbye to a priest who made history, the first Hispanic pastor ever, Monsignor Perfecto Vasquez.
Heavenly Father, please help us.
And praying to survive, a woman's plea to God as she escapes the flames in California. The news starts right now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. Strong reaction tonight after the Vatican told the U.S. bishops meeting in Baltimore to delay votes on new rules governing them in the midst of the sex abuse crisis. The Holy See wants nothing decided until the Pope convenes a global meeting in February. We begin our team coverage with Currents News' Michelle Powers standing by in Baltimore. Michelle.
Right now, the bishops are having an open discussion about clerical sex abuse. The Vatican delay hasn't stopped any forward progress here. The bishops are fiercely looking for reform and for answers.
Good morning, brothers.
Cardinal Daniel DiNardo began Tuesday's meeting assuring concerned bishops that he would bring their voices on sex abuse to the Vatican's February meeting. Many stood to speak out, urging brother bishops that they need to do something, anything.
I came from a diocese that was damaged, greatly damaged, for 16 years and beyond by the predatory behavior of the diocesan bishop. So this is very personal for me. I know what happened. So we have to really give a clear response.
We do have a responsibility to take care of our sheep. Our Holy Father has called us to accompany our sheep. Our people are crying out for some action.
Bishop Thomas Paprocki received spontaneous applause. The bishops agreed they would move forward with discussions about a third-party reporting system, a special commission for complaints against bishops, and standards of accountability for bishops involved in the sex abuse crisis, all items that were slotted to be voted upon. The bishops also agreed that they will consider asking the Vatican to release all of the documents related to ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick.
Your response to this crisis has been incomplete.
Dr. Francesco Cesario, the head of the National Review Board, praised the progress made since 2002, but at the same time cited a lack of transparency and accountability that is hurting the Catholic faithful.
It is shameful that the sin of abuse was hidden and allowed to fester until uncovered by the secular world.
He went on to recommend a full review of all diocesan files dating back to 1950 and urge bishops to have those findings go public. In an exclusive interview with Currents News, Bishop Christopher COYNE, the head of the USCCB Committee on Communication, expressed a similar view. He is in favor of every diocese voluntarily releasing a list of all those, living or dead, with substantial allegations against them.
The only way you can cure cancer, the cancerous sin, which was the sin of abuse of children, and the fact that it was covered up by a number, and still is being covered up in some instances, needs to be removed completely. Otherwise, the cancer is going to keep spreading.
Bishop COYNE was the former spokesman for the Archdiocese of Boston during the 2002 sex abuse crisis. Another item on the bishop's agenda today was a pastoral letter against racism. Now, that is still an active item, and the bishops will be voting on it tomorrow. From Baltimore, Michelle Powers, back to you in the studio, Liz.
Michelle, with everything going on, what's the mood like at the meeting?
Liz, the mood is very somber. It's very serious. Even when lunch comes around, bishops are just talking to each other in a low whisper. They really want to get things done, though. At every meeting that we have today and every breakout session, people are standing up and they want to address this head on and they want to get it right. We said never again in 2002, and they want to make sure that that really does happen this time around.
Michelle, are the bishops prepared to rate this gathering? Do you think they'd call the assembly a success, even though the votes on the new rules are now delayed?
A lot of bishops are calling this a success. If you were in the meetings today, they were speaking about it and moving forward as if they were going to vote on it. They're still having all those discussions, so I think that bishops will call this a success. And even though the votes are not being heard, survivors are going to be heard. Let's hear from them. Clutching pictures of themselves at the age they were first abused, survivors walked in silence, a protest against the church they say didn't speak up.
I now will finally have an answer to a question that I've waited my whole life to see, and that is, does canon law outweigh federal law?
SHAUN Dougherty finally came forward about his abuse during Pennsylvania's recent Attorney General investigation. He had hoped change was coming to the church, but he was disappointed.
We will not be voting on the 2 action items in our documentation regarding the abuse crisis.
Cardinal Daniel DiNardo said the Holy See is insisting the bishops wait to vote until after the Pope's February meeting focused on sex abuse. At the time of the announcement, Cardinal BLASE CUPICH stood up and recommended the bishops still vote.
We need to act soon, without delay.
Cardinal CUPICH also suggested that the U.S. bishops hold a special meeting in March to begin immediately enacting new protocols following the Vatican's February summit.
Abuse of a child is the closest that you can get to murder and still possibly have a breathing body before you.
The bishops also officially heard from several survivors during their day of prayer and reflection Monday. Luis Torres is from the Diocese of Brooklyn.
The Diocese of Brooklyn, particularly through its VAC, Victim Assistance Coordinator, has demonstrated to me its willingness to share in my journey and its commitment to restoring faith, where once I only knew betrayal.
Outside, survivors say they will continue protesting peacefully.
And I think that when we stand out here and we speak for victims, the victims know it's okay to speak up.
BECKY IANNI recognizes some gains the church has made in curbing abuse since 2002, but says one victim is too many. Becky told me that she is no longer a Catholic, but one day hopes that she can find God again. Liz?
Michelle, what else, if anything, have you heard from other survivors?
The survivors had told me that they're going to be out here until the meeting is over. A lot of them were very upset at what happened because of all the attorneys general's investigations. They were excited and they had hope for the first time in decades. And they were really hopeful that this meeting would turn out differently because of the voting, but we will see what happens.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much for that report. In the midst of the abuse crisis, Tokyo's Archbishop Isao Kikuchi is encouraging the clergy to honestly admit wrongdoing. And in an exclusive interview with Currents News, he's telling the laity to turn to the Gospels.
We have to be brave enough to go out to proclaim the good news, even though the situation is not easy.
In addition to bearing witness to Christ, Archbishop Kikuchi said Catholics can demonstrate their faith through charitable works and deeds. Archbishop Charles Scicluna, the Pope's top sex abuse investigator, is taking over a key post at the Vatican. He'll be the #2 man at the church office responsible for looking into abuse allegations, known as the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Francis sent him to Chile for an eyewitness investigation of the scandals that have crippled the church there. He remains Archbishop of Malta. Also part of our team in Baltimore is national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. Christopher, let's not waste any time. I want to start with the big headline out of this meeting. The Vatican is asking U.S. bishops to delay a vote on new rules for bishops in the midst of the clerical sex abuse crisis. What's the biggest impact of that decision?
Well, Liz, it's hard to get 300 bishops in a room silent, but when Cardinal DiNardo made that announcement yesterday, that's exactly what we witnessed. The biggest impact is that they're going to walk away from this meeting tomorrow without the promised tangibles that they had hoped to go back home to their diocese with, to say these are our immediate steps and we've taken action. In a sense, they've effectively hit the pause button until February.
And they have been talking about it, though, at least Chicago Cardinal CUPICH saying that the new rules need to be discussed, even if a vote is postponed. What do most of the other bishops think of that idea?
Yeah, absolutely, Liz. I think people are realizing that they can't just sit around and twiddle their thumbs here, that they actually have to talk about it and have some sort of forward motion. So what we've seen today and what we'll see tomorrow on Wednesday is continued discussion so that Cardinal DiNardo, when he goes to Rome in February, has a strong sense of where the bishops stand collectively as a whole.
So what this does now, as you've just mentioned, is all eyes now on the next major meeting, which is the Pope's Global Summit on Abuse at the Vatican in February. What are the expectations there?
Well, tremendous expectations. The pressure will be enormous, not just to have zero tolerance enacted across the board, but for bishops' accountability to become universalized, not just an American thing, but one in which the whole church can get behind. And I think this, it was already a high-stakes event, and this is probably going to be one of the most important moments of the Francis papacy.
Christopher, before I let you go, with all of this as a backdrop, a new appointment to consider. Pope Francis has tapped Archbishop Charles Scicluna as Secretary Adjunct to the Vatican's department in charge of abuse investigations. Is there a message behind that particular move?
Yeah, I mean, Archbishop Scicluna is very much seen as sort of the point person on this issue. He's a tough prosecutor and has been doing so for 2 decades now. I think this sends a strong sign that at the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which sort of has authority and jurisdiction over these cases, he wants his best man on his team, and that's what he's going to get in Archbishop Scicluna.
Christopher, in the time we have left, with the major action issues off the agenda, what will this meeting accomplish?
Well, I think there will be sort of a collective sense of where the bishops stand on this issue. There'll be other important things. Tomorrow the bishops will vote on their much delayed pastoral letter on racism, which is certainly needed. And I think many of the bishops are going to be proud to walk away finally having gotten that out in the open.
All right, Christopher, thank you so much for that input and perspective. Look forward to talking with you again.
Absolutely.
And to stay up to date with these fast-breaking developments, find the latest at the Currents News website, currentsny.tv, and on the tablet site, thetablet.org. The Pope will be heading to Morocco soon, the Vatican breaking the news this morning. The trip includes stops in Casablanca and Rabat on March 30th and 31st. The king of the Muslim country, Mohammed VI, invited the Holy Father. He'll be the second Pope to visit Morocco. John Paul II was there in 1985. There's a lot more news headed your way. Special insight from a top editor at America Magazine about the Vatican and the U.S. bishops meeting.
Because the Holy See did not explain why this happened, the void is being filled with all sorts of conspiracy theories.
The final goodbye to the priest who changed the history of the Brooklyn Diocese, Monsignor Perfecto Vasquez. And the latest from the California wildfires. Red flag warnings are up. There's fear the flames will spread. And an important programming note to share with you. Currents News will be moving to new time slots starting Monday, December 3rd. The news will air a half hour earlier at 7 p.m. right here on NET. Reruns will air at 10 p.m. and then the next morning again at 7:30 a.m. So mark your calendars. We'll be right back. Today, the Brooklyn Diocese said goodbye to Monsignor Perfecto Vasquez. The priest made history when he took over the parish of the Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Red Hook. He was the first Hispanic pastor ever. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports hundreds gathered to honor his life and his legacy.
The pews and lobby of St. Teresa Church in Woodside were packed. Worshippers saying goodbye to Monsignor Perfecto Vasquez. He was 85 years old. Monsignor Perfecto made history, becoming the first ever Hispanic pastor in the Brooklyn Diocese in 1975. He was assigned to Visitation of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church in Red Hook, Brooklyn.
He was a pioneer in this diocese, and he was very friendly, very popular.
Monsignor Perfecto was born in Spain on December 27, 1932. He became a Benedictine monk, but later thought God had another calling. He ministered in Puerto Rico, where he was also a math teacher. Monsignor Perfecto was ordained to the priesthood in 1956 and joined the Brooklyn Diocese nearly 2 decades later. During his time in the diocese, Monsignor Perfecto also served as pastor of St. Agnes Church in Cobble Hill and Guardian Angel Church in Brighton Beach. He was the spiritual director for the Cursillo movement, a Hispanic prayer group to strengthen the faith.
I got to see the way he lived his life, you know, in a very simple way, very humble. He was passionate about Jesus.
Retired Bishop Alfonso Cabezas presided at the massive Christian burial.
I have tears now and I'm sad, but it brings us great joy to see that he touched so many people and that there's so much love for him.
Yeah, he's gone, you know, but his spirit is always going to be with us.
He was the perfect image of a happy priest, of a joyful Christian.
And that's how other Hispanic Catholics will remember him, simply perfecto. In Woodside, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Red flag warnings are out tonight in California. The killer wildfires that have claimed at least 42 lives could soon become worse, whipped up by fierce winds. Karen Kafa reports the latest.
With the death toll in the north rising and near hurricane force gusts expected in the south, firefighters in California face another uphill battle.
From all that I've seen and heard, the fire burned hotter, faster, and destroyed not only homes, but deep infrastructure such as power lines, water lines, sewers, roads, lights, and other things that make a city a city.
The governor of California is clear about where he places blame.
The temperatures are warming. The winds are getting more intense. The fires are more likely. The hurricanes are more intense. Warming is occurring because of the continuing and rising carbon emissions.
The campfire burning in Northern California is now the deadliest in state history. The majority of lives lost come from this community, now burned to the ground.
A whole town was wiped off the face of the earth in a matter of 8 hours.
There is nothing left. All my neighbors except one are gone.
Meanwhile, fierce winds continue to threaten lives and homes in Southern California's Woolsey fire. Harrowing stories of escapes and close calls are emerging.
I called him because my car was completely surrounded by flames and I couldn't see out the window, and I started to fill up with smoke, and I called him and I said, "Nick, I'm gonna die and I'm not gonna make it out of here. There's just flames everywhere and I don't know what to do." And he said, "Don't die, run. If you're gonna die, die fighting."
Karen Kafa, Currents News.
More than 250,000 people have been ordered to escape the hellish flames of the California wildfires. For one woman, the scene her family witnessed as they quickly drove to safety was so terrifying that she began to pray.
Heavenly Father, please help us. Please help us to be safe.
That was Bryn Parrott Chatfield with her husband Jeremy behind the wheel. Their home and business in Paradise, California were taken by the blaze. They are now safe, as well as their 3 young girls who evacuated with their grandparents. The trial of notorious drug lord Joaquin Guzman, or El Chapo, was delayed today after a juror had to be dismissed. The judge feared the woman who cried last week upon hearing she was selected could suffer a breakdown. Guzman is being tried in a Brooklyn federal court. He's facing a 17-count indictment, including drug trafficking, murder, and torture charges. El Chapo was extradited here from Mexico, where he had escaped from prison twice. Still to come on Currents News, more on the Bishop's meeting in Baltimore. With votes delayed, a top editor from America Magazine will join us with insight on all of the implications. And they are calling it a path to redemption. Prisoners in Panama pitch in to help young faithful for World Youth Day 2019. Their story inspires. We'll be right back. More now on the U.S. Bishop's big meeting in Baltimore and our special coverage. America Magazine is a top Jesuit journal published around the world. The Rome edition is run by Father Antonio Spadaro, a very close advisor to the Pope. Here in New York, Kevin Clark is the magazine's senior editor, and he joins me now. Kevin, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting America Media today.
Oh, please, let's dive right into this one. We have been discussing at length throughout our program today the Vatican's decision to call on the U.S. bishops to delay those rules on that would cover the conduct in the midst of the clerical abuse crisis. I got to ask you, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think like a lot of journalists who cover the Holy See and cover the American Church, we were all completely, I think Greg Erlander from Catholic News Service put it best, or at least their headline today, gobsmacked. That decision, which apparently was also a great shock to Cardinal DiNardo and the entire U.S. Bishops' Conference, came out of nowhere this morning. I was on my way to work, and I got an alert from for our correspondent in Baltimore, Michael O'Loughlin, who said, "Hold on, the bishops have been told by Rome not to vote on these protocols that we've all been anticipating. We're all anticipating this being the centerpiece discussion at this fall conference." All of a sudden, all our editorial plans and all of their plans were completely in an uproar, and we just rushed to get some sort of coverage out as quickly as possible.
Kevin, obviously you have been covering this at length. How has the news about all of this been handled so far by both the Vatican and by U.S. bishops?
Well, I would love to say that this is unusually incompetent display from both parties, but we've been here before. The Vatican has a notoriously poor communications facade. I mean, they're constantly wrong-footing on what should be, fairly normal communications protocols, procedures.
What do you think is behind that?
I'm not sure. They've been hiring a lot of professionals, a lot of communications professionals in recent years to try and improve their performance, and yet we still end up with very poor lack of transparency, surprise decisions that are never quite explained. So this is a perfect example. Because the Holy See did not explain why this happened, the void is being filled with all sorts of conspiracy theories and all sorts of guessing and speculation. No one has any information, and yet it could be something that probably could be very easily explained if someone would do so in Rome.
And so now we wait. We have people from all over the Catholic Church, from prelates to lay people, that they really wanted to see, as you've mentioned, some kind of action with regard to this case. Now we have to wait until February.
Yeah.
Wise move by the Vatican?
I think it would have been wise to come out immediately and say, we need to halt this process now, and here's why. I think there's any number of valid reasons for them to be concerned. Talking about having lay people put over the Episcopal conferences in charge of bishops, they're controlling their accountability. It probably makes the global church, the episcopacies around the world, very nervous.
Kevin, I got to get this in the time that we have left. You were right that the McCarrick scandal was quickly converted into a broad challenge to the leadership of Pope Francis. What will it take for people to finally believe that the Holy Father is not only meeting this challenge, but doing his best to surmount it? We have about 30 seconds.
Well, I think, as the Pope says, he's got to confront the sin, the structural sin of clericalism, and just break that hold it has over the Church with transparency and real accountability. When bishops do wrong, they should be held accountable for it, and those wrongdoings should be brought to light immediately.
Kevin, I really thank you for your perspective on this. This is a tough story, and I'm sure we'll have you back. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
In January, young people from all over the world will meet Pope Francis in Panama for World Youth Day 2019. Preparation has kicked into high gear, and it's all hands on deck to make this event special. 35 prisoners from local prisons are also helping by building 250 confessionals where young people can receive reconciliation. The deputy director of the penitentiary system.
They're putting forth their best effort so that this work will be valued, dignified, and recognized. They built them with their own hands and with love for the event.
The confessionals will be in an area called Forgiveness Park. How appropriate. That is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Just a reminder that Currents News is moving to a new time slot. Starting Monday, December 3rd, the news will air at 7 p.m. And as always, thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.